Have you ever wondered if a single moment, a simple choice, could change everything? Most people believe that our lives are set on a certain path, that the rich get richer and the forgotten stay forgotten. But I'm here to tell you that's a lie. What if I told you that the most powerful force for change in the world isn't money or status, but a simple act of human kindness? The story you're about to see proves that destiny has a strange and beautiful way of working, and it all starts with the title of our video today: Homeless Woman Returns CEO's Lost Wallet. He fell in love instantly. On one side, you have Hunter Sanders, a ruthless, powerful CEO, a man who lives in a skyscraper, surrounded by wealth, but utterly alone in his heart. For him, a lost wallet is just a minor annoyance. On the other side, you have Leah Wright, a homeless woman living on the streets below his tower. A woman who has nothing but her own integrity. When she finds that wallet, two worlds that were never supposed to meet collide in a powerful, emotional story of redemption, overcoming, and discovering one's true worth. This isn't just a love story, it's a story that will make you question everything you think you know about people. So get comfortable, because you're about to witness a plot twist you won't see coming. And before we dive in, I want to know where our story is reaching today. Please let us know in the comments what beautiful city or town you're watching from, so we can feel connected with you all. And don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in the power of kindness. Subscribe to our channel for more heartaching stories like this, and share this video with someone whose heart you think it will touch. Let's begin. It all began on a Tuesday that felt just like any other grim, gray day. For Leah Wright, this meant another sunrise fighting the chill that seeped deep into her bones, a reminder of her life as a homeless person in a city that never slept, but always seemed to be dreaming without her. This particular morning, however, held a flicker of something different. A small, almost invisible deviation from the norm that would, unbeknownst to anyone, set in motion a chain of events so profound, it felt like destiny itself was waking up and choosing its players on a grand chessboard of life. A leather wallet, sleek and impossibly expensive, lay half hidden beneath a park bench, looking completely out of place in Leah's world of discarded newspapers and damp concrete. It was a relic from another universe, a universe of power and influence. It belonged to a man who had everything, a powerful CEO, though she didn't know it yet. Finding this lost wallet was more than a simple discovery, it was a collision of two worlds that were never meant to touch, a glitch in the matrix of society. For a moment, the city's noise faded into a dull hum. The weight of the wallet in her hands was substantial, not just from the leather, but from the unseen significance it carried. It was a tangible piece of a life she could only witness from the outside, through the gleaming windows of skyscrapers and the polished doors of luxury cars. This single object represented a test, a silent question posed by the universe. Her life of overcoming daily struggles had prepared her for many things, but perhaps not for this quiet moral crossroads. The temptation, of course, was a whispering devil on her shoulder. To a woman who had nothing, the contents of that wallet could mean a warm bed, a few decent meals, a brief respite from the relentless hardship. It was a shortcut, a gratuitous fail-free card, however temporary. But deep within Leah Wright, there was a core of integrity that had not been eroded by the streets. This was a moment that would define her true worth, not in dollars, but in character. This wasn't just about money, it was about a human connection, however faint. Someone, somewhere was missing this piece of their life. The thought of their panic, their frustration, began to eclipse her own needs. This was a person, not an opportunity. This simple, profound realization sparked an emotional current within her, a feeling that went beyond her own circumstances. Her decision was forming, solidifying, with a clarity that surprised even her. The story of this wallet was not over. In that instant, a quiet resolve settled over Leah, the powerful CEO, Hunter Sanders was about to have his meticulously controlled world turned upside down by the one person he would never have noticed. A beautiful and unlikely love story was about to begin, not with a glance across a crowded room, but with a simple act of kindness from a homeless woman. His life, so fortified by wealth, was about to be changed forever, and it all started with this lost wallet. Leah Wright's existence was a masterclass in survival, a daily dance on the jagged edge of society. Her home was a patchwork of temporary shelters and hidden alcoves, her bed a cold slab of concrete or a park bench shrouded in morning mist. To the bustling world that rushed past her, she was invisible, a ghost haunting the periphery of their busy lives. Yet, within this harsh reality, Leah nurtured a quiet resilience. She was a homeless woman, yes, but that was her situation, not her identity. Her spirit remained unbroken. Her most prized possessions weren't things you could hold, but qualities she held within. Her integrity was a fortress, unbreached by the desperation that gnawed at her daily. And her kindness was a currency she spent freely, offering a soft word to a fellow struggler, or sharing the meager half of a sandwich with someone needier than herself. These were her treasures, the bedrock of her character, her claim to a wealth that no bank could ever measure. They were her true worth in a world obsessed with material gain. She'd seen the worst of humanity in her time on the streets. She'd been ignored, mocked, and treated as less than human. She had every reason to be bitter, to let cynicism poison her soul. Yet, she resisted. She chose to believe in the flicker of good she occasionally saw in others, even if it was just a fleeting, sympathetic glance. This constant battle for her own humanity was a testament to her strength, a silent process of overcoming that no one ever witnessed. Life had thrown her a curveball that felt more like a cannonball, but she refused to be shattered. There was an emotional depth to her that was both a strength and a vulnerability. She felt the sting of every scornful look, the pang of every hungry night. But she also felt the warmth of the sun on her face with a gratitude that most people forget to experience. Her life was difficult, a constant struggle, but it was still hers, and she held onto it with a quiet, fierce dignity. This unwavering integrity was the only compass she had. It was this internal guide that made the decision about the lost wallet so straightforward, despite the monumental temptation it represented. For Leah, returning it wasn't a question of reward or recognition, it was simply the right thing to do. It was an affirmation of who she was, a declaration to the universe that even in the darkest of corners, a light of decency could still shine brightly and defiantly. And so, as she clutched the wallet, she wasn't just holding a rich man's leather accessory. She was holding onto herself, to the very essence of Leah Wright. Little did she know that this single act of honesty was the key that would unlock a future she couldn't even fathom. A future that would involve a powerful CEO and a surprising twist of destiny. The next step was to find its owner, a journey into a world completely alien to her own. Miles away, in a steel and glass tower that pierced the sky, Hunter Sanders moved through his world like a shark in a well-stocked aquarium. As the CEO of a vast corporate empire, his life was a meticulously curated symphony of power, profit, and control. His days were a blur of high-stakes meetings, ruthless negotiations, and the constant hum of a machine built to generate wealth. He was the quintessential rich man, a titan of industry whose name commanded both fear and respect in equal measure. The discovery that his wallet was missing was less an emotional event and more an infuriating logistical snag. It was an unwelcome disruption to his perfectly calibrated schedule. He didn't feel loss, he felt annoyance. The cash was pocket change, the credit cards easily canceled and replaced. The problem was the sheer inconvenience of it all, a frustrating pebble in the shoe of a man who was used to walking on polished marble floors. The concept of a lost wallet was trivial, almost beneath him. Hunter's world was one of transactions, of value measured in numbers on a screen. He hadn't built his empire with kindness, had built it with brutal efficiency and an almost surgical detachment from the messy, unpredictable world of human feelings. His isolation was a fortress of his own making, padded with luxury but devoid of genuine connection. He saw people as assets or liabilities, pieces on a board to be moved or sacrificed for the greater good of the company. He barked orders at his assistant, his voice sharp and laced with impatience. "Just cancel everything and get my driver's license replaced. I don't have time for this." To him, the wallet and its contents were just data, replaceable items. The idea that it might be found by someone, that a story could be attached to it, never even crossed his mind. The streets below his panoramic window were just a map, not a home to millions of individual stories, one of which was now intertwined with his. He was a man who had forgotten the meaning of true worth, confusing it with net worth. His success had come at a cost, hollowing out the parts of him that might have appreciated a simple, honest gesture. He was surrounded by people who wanted something from him, whose loyalty was bought and paid for. The concept of selfless action was as foreign to him as the life of the homeless woman who, at that very moment, was preparing to walk into his world. And so, he sat in his throne of power, frustrated by a minor problem, completely oblivious to the fact that the universe was sending him a message. He couldn't possibly imagine that the solution to his inconvenience was in the hands of someone he would have considered utterly insignificant. A plot twist was coming for Hunter Sanders, one that would force him to confront the man he had become and the emptiness of the gilded cage he called life. With the wallet feeling like a strange forbidden artifact in her possession, Leah Wright found a quiet corner in a nearby alley, away from the prying eyes of the indifferent city. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a mix of fear and a strange sort of reverence. This was it. She needed to find out who this belonged to. With trembling fingers, she unfastened the clasp, the soft click echoing loudly in the relative silence. The scent of rich, genuine leather, a smell from another world, filled her senses. The first thing she saw was the cash. A thick wad of $100 bills stared up at her, more money than she had seen in years, maybe ever. It was enough to change everything, at least for a while. It was a warm hotel room, a new coat, a dozen hot meals, a brief escape from the gnawing hunger and cold. The temptation was a physical thing, a tightening in her chest. But then her eyes fell upon the driver's license, and the money faded into the background. A powerful, stern face stared back. Hunter Sanders, CEO. The sheer amount of wealth represented in that small leather rectangle was staggering. A cascade of platinum and black credit cards sat nestled in their slots, each a key to a kingdom of limitless spending. For a moment, she felt a wave of dizziness. The disparity between her life and the life of this rich man was a chasm so wide, it was almost comical. It was a harsh, undeniable reminder of her place in the world, of how a homeless person could be living in the same city as this king, yet be worlds apart. Yet, despite the shock, her first and only real instinct was not to take, but to return. It wasn't even a debate in her mind, it was a simple, solid fact. This wasn't hers. This belonged to Hunter Sanders. This act was not about him, the powerful CEO she would likely never meet, but about her. It was a testament to her own unbreakable code, a quiet act of defiance against the hand life had dealt her. Her kindness and integrity were her North Star. Her mind immediately shifted from the what if of the money to the how to of returning it. The ID had an address, but it wasn't a home, it was a corporate headquarters, a building she knew well, a steel monolith that scraped the clouds. The thought of walking in there was intimidating, to say the least. She, in her worn clothes and weary state, stepping into a world of pristine suits and polished floors. It was a journey into the lion's den, an act of overcoming her own fear and insecurity. She carefully closed the wallet, the click of the clasp sealing her decision. Everything was in its place, untouched. This was more than a lost wallet, it was a vessel of character, both his and hers. This was her mission now, a small but significant purpose in a day that had started with none. She had no idea that this simple, honest choice was a thread of destiny, pulling her toward a life-altering surprise and a deeply emotional encounter. Getting to the corporate headquarters was a journey in itself, a pilgrimage across a city that seemed to erect invisible walls around its temples of commerce. When Leah Wright finally stood before the colossal glass and steel structure of Sanders Corp., she felt smaller than ever. The building loomed over her, a monument to a world she was not a part of. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she pushed through the revolving doors, her worn-out boots silent on the gleaming marble floor. The sudden hush of the lobby was deafening. Instantly, all eyes were on her. The air, once filled with the quiet hum of business, grew thick with judgment. She was an anomaly, a glitch in their polished, perfect world. The security guards at the front desk straightened up, their expressions shifting from bored indifference to suspicion. They saw her ragged clothes, her weathered face, and drew their conclusions in a heartbeat. To them, she wasn't a person, she was a problem, a homeless woman who had clearly lost her way. "Can I help you?" one of the guards asked, his tone dripping with a condescending authority that was meant to intimidate, to make her turn and leave. His eyes raked over her, making her feel dirty, insignificant. Leah, who had faced down so much in her life with quiet strength, felt a familiar sting of shame. She was being humiliated before she had even spoken a word, judged solely on her appearance. This was the barrier she knew she would have to face. Holding her ground, she approached the desk, her voice soft but firm. "In here to see Mr. Sanders. I have something that belongs to him." She held up the lost wallet, a clear sign of her good intentions, but the guards merely exchanged a look of cynical amusement. It was a story they'd probably heard before, a common ploy in their minds for a handout. The idea of genuine kindness from someone like her was simply not in their programming. "Mr. Sanders is a very busy man," the other guard scoffed, blocking her path with his body. "He doesn't have time for this. You should probably just leave." The dismissal was total, a brutal reminder of her station. They were gatekeepers, not just to a building, but to a world of respect and dignity, and the gates were firmly closed. To her, the situation felt hopeless, a cruel joke played by destiny. Leah stood there, a lone island in a sea of silent judgment. She had come with the purest of intentions, a heart full of integrity, only to be met with a wall of prejudice. She could feel the stares of employees passing by, a mixture of pity and contempt. It was a deeply emotional and draining moment. She was on the verge of giving up, of leaving the wallet and walking away from this place that made her feel so worthless. But what would happen then? The commotion in the lobby, however small, was a disruption, and disruptions eventually made their way to the top. An assistant, buzzing with nervous energy, informed Hunter Sanders that a woman was causing a scene, insisting she had something for him. Annoyed at the interruption, the CEO descended from his ivory tower, his face a mask of irritation. He strode into the lobby, his expensive shoes clicking with an air of authority that made everyone stand a little straighter. His world was order, and this was chaos. He saw Leah Wright immediately, a stark and jarring contrast to the pristine environment he so carefully cultivated. His eyes swept over her, and his mind, conditioned by years of wealth and isolation, made a swift and ruthless calculation. He saw a homeless woman, disheveled and out of place. His initial assumption was immediate and cynical: she was here for a handout. It was a scenario he had dealt with before, and his patience for it was not existent. What is the meaning of this?" Hunter's voice was cold, sharp, and loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. He didn't address Leah directly at first, instead glaring at his security team. "Why is this being allowed to happen in my building?" The public nature of the confrontation was a deliberate power play, designed to intimidate and disperse. He was making an example of her, a clear message to anyone who dared to step out of line. He was ready to have her thrown out. Leah felt a fresh wave of humiliation wash over her. To be dismissed so callously by the very man she had come to help was a bitter pill to swallow. This rich man looked at her not as a person, but as a stain on his perfect marble floor. The sting of his words was sharp, a public reinforcement of what the guard's sneers had already told her: "You do not belong here." Her spirit wavered, but the weight of the wallet in her pocket grounded her. Finally, his icy gaze landed on her. "If you're here to ask for money, you're wasting your time, and more importantly, you're wasting mine." The dismissal was absolute, dripping with the arrogance of a man who believed he had everyone figured out. He didn't see an individual with a story, he saw a stereotype, a problem to be erased. He was completely blind to the incredible act of kindness that had brought her to his doorstep, seeing only a nuisance. He expected her to cower, to beg, or to scurry away. He was ready for a fight, for a plea, for anything but what was about to happen next. Hunter Sanders, the powerful CEO, stood there in his magnificent lobby, annoyed and utterly dismissive, completely unprepared for the surprise that was about to unfold. He had no idea that this emotional encounter was the first tremor of an earthquake that would shatter the foundations of his world. In the face of Hunter's cold dismissal, a quiet strength settled over Leah Wright. The eyes of the entire lobby were on her, expecting her to crumble. Instead, she met the CEO's glare not with fear, but with a calm, unwavering dignity. She said nothing. Words, she knew, would be useless against a wall of such prejudice. So she let her actions speak for her. With a steady hand, she reached into her worn coat pocket, the silence in the grand hall becoming thick with anticipation. She pulled out the sleek, black leather wallet and held it out to him. It was a simple gesture, but in that context, it was monumental. Hunter Sanders stared at the object, his brain taking a moment to process what he was seeing. It was his lost wallet, the one he had just been barking orders about. He froze, his arrogant posture faltering for the first time. The guards exchanged confused glances. This was not the scenario they had prepared for. This was a plot twist no one saw coming. He took the wallet from her hand, his fingers brushing against hers for a fleeting second. The contrast was stark, a smooth, manicured hand against her calloused, weathered one. He opened it mechanically, his mind still reeling from the surprise. He thumbed through the contents, his eyes widening slightly as he found everything perfectly, meticulously intact. The thick stack of cash, the credit cards, nothing was missing. Everything was exactly as it had been. For a moment, Hunter was left utterly speechless. His assumptions, his cynical worldview, his immediate judgment, it all came crashing down around him in a silent, spectacular implosion. He had looked at this homeless woman and seen a beggar, a problem. But he was wrong. He had been so profoundly, embarrassingly wrong. He had humiliated a person who was showing him a level of integrity he rarely encountered, even in his own circles of the wealthy and powerful. A complex, unfamiliar cocktail of emotions began to stir within him. Shame, confusion, and a flicker of something else: respect, admiration. It was a deeply emotional moment for a man who prided himself on being unemotional. He looked at Leah, truly looked at her for the first time, and saw not her ragged clothes, but the quiet strength in her eyes. He saw her true worth, and it had absolutely nothing to do with money. Clearing his throat and attempting to regain his composure, he reverted to the only way he knew how to solve a problem with money: He pulled out the entire wad of cash from the wallet. "Here," he said, his voice softer now, lacking its earlier bite. "Take it. You deserve a reward for your honesty." He offered her the money, a gesture he thought was generous, a transaction to balance the scales. But he was about to receive another lesson. Leah looked at the thick stack of bills Hunter was holding out to her, the very same money that could have been a lifeline just hours before. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. She gently but firmly shook her head, pushing his hand and the money away. The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. A homeless woman was refusing a reward that could change her life. It was an act so contrary to logic, so defiant of expectation, that it left everyone, especially the CEO, completely bewildered. "No, thank you, sir," she said, her voice clear and steady, echoing slightly in the silent hall. "My integrity isn't for sale." The words landed with a quiet power that was more impactful than any shouted demand. It was a simple statement of fact, a declaration of her true worth. She wasn't looking for a handout or a reward. She had done the right thing because it was the right thing, and that was the end of the transaction in her mind. This wasn't about his money, it was about her character. Hunter Sanders felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He had just been checked, and it was a checkmate. He, the master negotiator, the man who believed everything had a price, was facetto-faced with something priceless. This woman, who had nothing, possessed a richness of spirit that made his own immense wealth feel suddenly cheap and hollow. It was a humbling, deeply emotional experience that chipped away another layer of his hardened exterior. Having refused the money, Leah saw a flicker of something different in his eyes, not pity, but genuine confusion, perhaps even respect. She decided to take a chance, to seize this one tiny opening that destiny had provided. But she added, her voice dropping slightly, filled with a humble sincerity, "If you are feeling generous, in not looking for a gift, in looking for a chance." The air crackled with a new kind of tension. She looked him directly in the eye, all her vulnerability and hope laid bare. "Is there any chance for a job? Any job, you'll do anything. I'm a hard worker. I just need an opportunity." It was a plea, yes, but it was a plea for work, not for charity. It was the ultimate testament to her desire for dignity, for a path toward overcoming her circumstances through her own effort. She wasn't asking him to save her, but to give her the tools to save herself. Hunter stared at her, his mind racing. This entire encounter had shattered his preconceived notions. First, the return of the lost wallet, then the refusal of the reward. And now this bold, humble request for a job. It was a series of surprises that left him intrigued, impressed against his will. This wasn't just a homeless woman. This was a person of extraordinary character, and he had to know more. What would he do next? Hunter Sanders was a man of calculated risks, a CEO who built an empire by seeing opportunities where others saw none. And right now, standing in his lobby, he saw something far more valuable than a recovered wallet. He saw a puzzle, an anomaly, a person of such unexpected character that his curiosity was profoundly piqued. Leah Wright was a blank slate, a mystery. Offering her a job was an impulse, but it was an impulse rooted in a deep strategic intrigue. He wanted to see what she was made of. "A job," he repeated, a thoughtful expression replacing his earlier shock. He glanced around the pristine lobby, at the polished floors and gleaming surfaces. A plan, a test, began to form in his mind. He could easily give her money, send her on her way, and return to his orderly life. But that felt too easy, too meaningless. This emotional encounter felt significant, a moment of destiny he couldn't just ignore. He felt a strange pull to keep her in his orbit. He looked back at Leah, his gaze intense. "We have an opening on the office cleaning staff, the night shift. It's hard work, long hours. Not glamorous, He laid it out in the starkest terms possible, deliberately making it sound unappealing. This wasn't a reward, it was a challenge. He was testing her. Was her request for a job genuine? Did she truly want to work, or was it just a more clever way of asking for help? He was testing her resolve, her humility. To his surprise, Leah's face didn't fall. It lit up. A genuine, radiant smile broke through her weary expression. A smile so full of hope it seemed to brighten the entire cavernous lobby. The prospect of hard, unglamorous work didn't deter her, it energized her. "I'll take it," she said, without a moment's hesitation. "Thank you. You won't regret it." Her gratitude was so pure, so overwhelming, it caught Hunter off guard once again. This was a critical turning point. Hunter's offer, a test of her resolve, was met with an answer that revealed the depth of her desire for overcoming her situation. She wasn't afraid of starting at the absolute bottom. In fact, she embraced it. For her, it wasn't a demeaning position, it was a ladder, and she was just grateful for the first rung. This was the beginning of a strange and unlikely professional relationship, and so the pact was sealed. The homeless woman who had found a lost wallet was now an employee of the powerful rich man she had returned it to. Hunter instructed his bewildered HR head to handle the paperwork, to get her a uniform, to treat her like any other new hire. He walked back to the elevator, a whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. He had set a test in motion, but he had a feeling that he was the one who was about to be schooled. Leah Wright's new life began under the fluorescent glow of empty office corridors, long after the important people had gone home. She performed her duties on the cleaning staff with a quiet dignity and a meticulous grace that was deeply ingrained in her character. Every floor she mopped, every desk she dusted, was an act of gratitude, a step away from the life she had left behind. This job wasn't a punishment or a test to her, it was a sanctuary, a chance at overcoming her past. However, her presence did not go unnoticed, nor was it welcomed. Hunter's arrogant employees, the ones who paraded their expensive suits and important titles during the day, would sometimes stay late. They would see her push in her cart and look at her with unconcealed disdain. Whispers followed her down the hallways. "Did you hear? The CEO hired a homeless woman." She became a sort of morbid curiosity, a target for their casual cruelty and snobbery. The worst of it came from Hunter's fiancée, a woman named Victoria, whose entire existence seemed to be a performance of wealth and social status. She was materialistic to the core, viewing the world and everyone in it through a lens of price tags and prestige. When she learned that Hunter had hired Leah, she was appalled. She would often forget something at the office late at night, just for the opportunity to mock and belittle the new cleaning lady. Victoria would make a point of dropping a tissue on a floor Leah had just cleaned, or making the snide remark about her uniform. "Darling, are you sure this is a good idea?" she'd say. To Hunter later, "What will people think? It's charity, and it looks messy." She constantly tried to poison Hunter's mind against Leah, seeing her not as a human being but as a blemish on their perfect, curated life. Leah endured every single one of these moments, feeling deeply humiliated, yet she never broke. She never complained, never retaliated. She would simply meet their taunts with a quiet, unwavering politeness that seemed to infuriate them even more. Her grace was her shield. This daily onslaught was a heavy emotional burden, but Leah's focus was elsewhere. She was determined to prove her true worth through her work ethic and her unshakable integrity. She refused to let their smallness diminish. Her newfound purpose, unbeknownst to them all, a silent observer was taking notice. Hunter Sanders, the powerful CEO, had not forgotten about the woman from his lobby. He had put her in this position to test her, and now, from a distance, he was watching the results of his experiment unfold. He saw the mockery, he saw the prejudice, and most importantly, he saw Leah's incredible, resilient dignity in the face of it all. and it was beginning to change him. Hunter Sanders started doing something he hadn't done in years. He started staying late. He would retreat to his corner office, the supposed CEO burning the midnight oil, but his focus wasn't on spreadsheets or market reports. Instead, his gaze would drift towards the security monitors, a grid of silent black and white scenes from his own company. He was secretly observing Leah Wright, drawn in by the quiet drama unfolding in the empty halls of his empire. He watched as she performed her duties not just with diligence, but with a certain reverence. He saw her find a fallen photograph on an employee's desk and carefully place it back, taking a moment to straighten the frame. He saw her collect leftover food from a catered meeting, not for herself, but to quietly leave it for the night security guard who always looked tired. These small, unseen acts of kindness were like glimpses into her very soul, revealing a profound depth of character. It was during these late-night observations that he began to notice something else, something that completely defied his expectations. One night, he watched as she paused her cleaning to look at a complex flowchart left on a whiteboard in a conference room. He saw her trace the lines with her finger, her brow furrowed in concentration. It wasn't the idle glance of a cleaner, it was the focused gaze of someone who was actually understanding it. He was seeing her surprisingly sharp intellect at work. This fascinated him. Who was this woman? Society had labeled her homeless, a term that implied a lack of everything. But here she was, displaying more integrity, kindness, and now, intellectual curiosity than most of the high-paid executives he employed. The label was a lie. He was beginning to understand that her situation had never defined her true worth. This secret observation became his obsession, a nightly ritual that was far more compelling than any business deal. This surveillance was a deeply emotional journey for Hunter. Each act of grace he witnessed chipped away at the cynical armor he had built around his heart. He had hired her as a test, a curiosity, but she was inadvertently teaching him a masterclass in humanity. He started to feel a strange sense of protectiveness, a growing anger at the employees who humiliated her, and a profound admiration for her resilience. He was seeing the real Leah Wright, not the caricature his prejudice had created. And the more he saw, the more he was captivated. He began to feel a connection, a pull towards her that was completely illogical, yet undeniable. It wasn't just about a lost wallet anymore. It wasn't about a test. A love story was beginning to write itself in the silent late-night hours, a story he wasn't even aware he was the protagonist of. His perspective was shifting, preparing the ground for a major plot twist. The crisis hit Sanders Corp like a hurricane. A multi-million-dollar deal, one that Hunter had spent months personally negotiating, was on the verge of collapsing. A critical logistical flaw had been discovered at the 11th hour, a complex problem that threatened to cascade into a catastrophic failure for one of their biggest clients. Panic began to ripple through the executive floors. The deal was everything, and its failure would be a public and very expensive humiliation. Hunter assembled his top team, the best and brightest minds his money could buy. For hours, they were holed up in the main boardroom, a room full of expensive suits and even more expensive educations. They whiteboarded, they argued, they ran projections, they drank gallons of coffee. But they were stuck. They were all looking at the problem from the same high-level, seal-like perspective, and they were all hitting the same wall. The solution remained maddeningly out of reach. Frustrated and exhausted, Hunter retreated to his office late that night, the silence of the building amplifying his sense of failure. He slumped into his chair, staring at the whiteboard covered in failed strategies. It was in that moment of defeat that Leah Wright began her nightly cleaning route, her cart gliding silently into the executive suite. She saw the lights on in Hunter's office and the tense atmosphere, but as always, she simply went about her work quietly, respectfully. As she cleaned the boardroom, she couldn't help but notice the diagrams and notes left on the main whiteboard. Her sharp, analytical mind, the one Hunter had secretly glimpsed, began to connect the dots. She saw the problem not from the top down, but from the bottom up. She saw the human element, the practical on-the-ground logistics that the executives, in their strategic bubble, had completely overlooked. The solution to her was surprisingly simple, almost obvious. Knowing her place, she would never dare to interrupt. But the thought of them losing this important deal because of such a simple oversight gnawed at her. So she did something discreet and brave. She tore a small, neat piece of paper from her notepad. In her clear, simple handwriting, she anonymously wrote down a single sentence, a simple yet brilliant question that reframed the entire problem. She quietly slipped onto Hunter's desk, placing it where he couldn't miss it, and disappeared back into the shadows. It was an act of pure kindness and intellectual generosity. She didn't want credit, she just wanted to help. She had no idea that this small, anonymous note was a ticking time bomb of a surprise, a catalyst that was about to blow Hunter Sanders's world wide open. The lost wallet had been the opening chapter, but this quiet act of brilliance was the beginning of a major plot twist in their story. Hunter Sanders stared at the anonymous note on his desk, his tired mind initially dismissing it as just another piece of paper. But the question written on it was so simple, so profoundly insightful, it cut through the noise of his complicated failures like a razor. It wasn't a complex formula or a high-level strategy, it was a fundamental question about the process that his entire team of experts had completely missed. It was brilliant. It was the key. He immediately called his top executives back into the boardroom, a new energy surging through him. He presented the idea, framing it as his own, for now, and watched as a wave of realization washed over their faces. It was one of those moments where the solution is so elegant and obvious in hindsight that everyone wonders how they missed it. The idea, born from a perspective of practical, on-the-ground reality, saved the multi-million-dollar deal. The crisis was averted. But as the celebrations and backpatting began, Hunter's mind was elsewhere. He was consumed by a single, burning question: who wrote the note? It wasn't any of his executives, he knew how they thought. He replayed the night in his mind, the parade of people who had been in and out of his office. And then it hit him, a jolt of certainty that was both shocking and exhilarating. He pulled up the security footage from his office on his computer. There she was, Leah Wright. He watched the footage of her cleaning the boardroom, her thoughtful gaze on the whiteboard. He saw her pause, tear a sheet from her notepad, and then, with a quiet determination, walk into his office and place the small note on his desk. The proof was undeniable. The brilliant, deal-saving idea had not come from his highly paid team, but from the cleaning lady. The plot twist was more staggering than he could have ever imagined. In that instant, Hunter realized that only Leah could have had the unique perspective to solve the problem. She wasn't bogged down by corporate dogma or executive ego. She saw the world with a clarity and practicality that his wealth and power had blinded him to. This realization was a profound, deeply emotional moment for the powerful CEO. It was a complete reordering of his understanding of value and intelligence. He had hired her as a test, a project. But the truth was, she was the one who was teaching him everything. She had saved him and his company, not with an MBA, but with a quiet observation and a simple act of kindness. The lost wallet had been a test of her character. This note was a test of his. Would he ignore it, take the credit, and move on? Or would he finally acknowledge the incredible person who had been right under his nose all along? The revelation from the security footage fundamentally changed everything for Hunter Sanders. It was as if he had been looking at a black and white photograph his whole life, and someone had suddenly flipped a switch, revealing a world of vibrant color. He looked out of his office window at the sprawling city below, but he wasn't seeing a kingdom to be conquered anymore. He was seeing a world of hidden talents and overlooked souls, personified by the woman cleaning his floors. He began to see Leah not as a homeless woman, a label that now felt insulting and absurdly reductive, but as the single most valuable person in his entire company. His executives brought him problems, egos, and office politics. Leah, on the other hand, had brought him integrity, kindness, and now a multi-million-dollar solution. The contrast was so stark, it was almost laughable. His entire corporate structure, his whole system of valuation, was a sham. The concept of true worth crystallized in his mind with breathtaking clarity. It had nothing to do with the car you drove, the suit you wore, or the title on your business card. It was about character. It was about seeing a problem and quietly, selflessly fixing it. It was about having the humility to scrub floors and the intellect to save a corporation in the same night. Leah Wright was, by this new and profound metric, the richest person he had ever met. A deep, transformative shift was occurring within. The ruthless CEO, the walls around his heart, built over years of cynical transactions and emotional isolation, were crumbling. He felt a powerful, undeniable connection to Leah, a feeling that went far beyond gratitude or professional respect. It was a deeply emotional current, a recognition of a kindred spirit in the most unexpected of places. This was the work of destiny. He found himself replaying every memory of her quiet dignity in the face of being humiliated, her radiant smile when he offered her a job, her focused gaze on the whiteboard. These weren't just random events anymore, they were pieces of a puzzle, a beautiful love story unfolding in the most unconventional way. He was falling for her, not for her appearance or status, but for the sheer, unshakable power of her character. Hunter knew he could no longer stand by and watch from the shadows. The experiment was over. The test was passed, not by her, but by him. He had seen the truth, and now he had to act on it. The time for secret observations was over. He needed to talk to her, to acknowledge what she had done, and to bridge the vast social chasm that separated them. The next step would require a level of vulnerability he hadn't shown in decades. Hunter arranged for Leah to meet him in his office the next evening, under the pretense of discussing her work schedule. When she walked in her simple cleaning uniform, she was understandably nervous, expecting perhaps a reprimand for an unknown infraction. Instead, she found Hunter Sanders standing by the window, his usual commanding aura replaced by a quiet, contemplative vulnerability. The power dynamic in the room felt different, softer. "Leah," he began, his voice lacking its usual corporate edge. "Please sit down." He didn't sit behind his massive desk, his throne of power. Instead, he took a chair opposite her, closing the physical and symbolic distance between them. "I don't want to talk about your work. I want to apologize." The words hung in the air, a stunning surprise that left Leah momentarily speechless. An apology was the last thing she ever expected from the powerful CEO. "I was wrong," Hunter continued, his gaze direct and filled with a sincerity that was profoundly emotional. "When you came to my lobby with my lost wallet, I judged you. I humiliated you. I saw your clothes, not your character. It was an arrogant and ugly thing to do, and I am truly sorry." This confession was a monumental act for a man like Hunter, an admission of fallibility that stripped away his title and left just the man. He then placed the anonymous note on the table between them. "And I know this was you." Leah's eyes widened, a blush rising to her cheeks. "You saved a deal that my entire team of experts couldn't fix. You didn't do it for credit or reward. You did it just to help." For the first time, Leah saw not the intimidating rich man, but the person underneath. She saw his regret, his admiration, his humanity. In that quiet office, high above the sleeping city, the chasm between them vanished. They were no longer the CEO and the homeless woman turned cleaner. They were just Hunter and Leah, two souls connecting on a raw, honest, and deeply emotional level. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives, their hopes, their struggles. He saw the brilliant, resilient woman behind the hardship, and she saw the lonely, searching man behind the wealth. They were seeing each other's true worth for the first time. This conversation was a moment of pure redemption, not just for Hunter's initial judgment, but for the years he had spent in emotional isolation. It was a heart-touching connection that felt like the culmination of a journey orchestrated by destiny. A beautiful, unlikely love story had officially begun, built not on flirtation or romance, but on a foundation of mutual respect and profound human understanding. But the world outside this room was not so understanding. The stage was set at the quarterly company board meeting. The room was a sea of dark suits and stern faces, the pinnacle of corporate power. Hunter Sanders stood at the head of the table, ready to address them. But before he could begin, his fiancée, Victoria, ever the opportunist, decided to make her move. With a smug, theatrical sigh, she brought up what she considered a personnel issue that was damaging the company's image. "Hunter, darling," she began, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's about the homeless woman you hired. I think this little charity project has gone on long enough. Several board members have expressed their discomfort. She's a cleaner. She was seen snooping in the boardroom. For the sake of our reputation, I think it's time we let her go." She looked around the table for support, her attempt to publicly humiliate Leah one last time. A tense silence fell over the room. But before anyone could agree, Hunter held up his hand. "Stop," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority that silenced the entire room. He looked directly at Victoria, his eyes cold with disappointment. "First of all, her name is Leah Wright. And you're right, she was in the boardroom. In fact, she's the sole reason we are celebrating saving the Henderson account today." The plot twist landed like a thunderclap. He proceeded to expose Victoria's shallow, materialistic nature to the entire board, recounting her petty cruelties and her obsession with appearances over substance. Then, in a stunning status reversal that left everyone breathless, he turned his attention back to the board. "Leah Wright will not be fired. In fact, I am creating a new executive position for her, effective immediately. Head of a new department of process innovation. Her unique perspective is this company's single greatest asset." The shock in the room was palpable, but Hunter wasn't finished. He looked around at the stunned faces, his gaze finally resting on the empty chair beside him. "This isn't about charity or a project," he confessed, his voice now thick with an emotional power that was undeniable. "In telling you all this because I fell in love. It happened instantly, right in the lobby of this building. Not with her appearance, but with the strength of her character the moment she handed me back my lost wallet, asking for nothing in return." He declared that his relationship with Victoria was over and that Leah Wright was the future, not just of the company, but of his life. It was a moment of complete redemption and overcoming, a testament to seeing true worth. The powerful CEO, the guarded rich man, had laid his heart bare, completing the most beautiful and unlikely love story, all set in motion by an act of pure kindness. The ultimate underdog had not just won, she had redefined the game. And so, a lost wallet didn't just find its way back to its owner, it led two people to find their way to each other. What a journey! From the cold, lonely streets to the highest seat of corporate power, we witnessed a story that proves that a person's true worth is not in their bank account, but in the richness of their character. Hunter and Leah's incredible love story is a powerful reminder that kindness is a key that can unlock any door, and that destiny often works in the most surprising and heartaching ways. We saw someone who was humiliated rise with dignity, and a powerful rich man find his own redemption by learning to see with his heart. It's a story of overcoming that resonates with all of us. Now we'd love to hear from you. What part of this emotional story impacted you the most? Was it the moment Leah refused the reward or the stunning plot twist in the boardroom? Let us know in the comments below. Did you expect this ending, or did you have a different outcome in mind? We read everything. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a huge thumbs up. It really helps our channel grow. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We have a huge library of stories for you to watch, so check those out next. Thank you for being here with us today. Until next time.